back to the questions. To my channel. So today I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of a demo along with a frequently asked questions video of how to paint something with the faux granite look using paint and epoxy. So I've been getting a lot of questions on my YouTube channel, my Facebook channel, my Instagram channel, all that kind of generically have the same question, or I can answer just about the same way. So I decided to compile it and throw all that information into another video for you guys. Now I have already done one of these videos, but that was my first one and I was just kind of getting the hang of it, and I myself was new to it and I didn't have a lot of information to give you guys on what works best, what brands I liked, tricks and tips, and what types of sinks you can do, what surfaces, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate that for you. We're going to go through the video and I'm going to show you step by step everything that I'm doing, explain some things and answer some of the questions that I'm getting, and then again at the end, if I didn't answer any of the questions for you during the video, at the end I'm going to answer some more of the questions that I've compiled from those social media platforms that you guys have left for me. And then I'm going to throw on the end some of you guys' recreations, because this Savage Squad is savage. I've been getting some amazing tags and some awesome transformations, so you guys deserve a lot of credit for that, and I want to throw those in at the end. Also, they also answer some of the questions I've been getting from some people. Some people have been asking, can you do it inside this sink, or how do I do the backsplash, or can I do things other than counters, like Tamara did an RV. Hello! It was amazing. So I thought I would share those with you guys at the end. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll answer all of those questions for you. The first question that I get asked a lot is, what brand epoxy do you like the best? I don't particularly have a favorite. I've used several. My two top that I can get my hands on that I use frequently are Parks brand and the Famo Wood brand epoxy. For this particular table, I did two different brands to compare to show you guys that it kind of doesn't matter as long as it's a clear epoxy, if this is the result you're looking for. So I did half of it with actually a Hobby Lobby brand one, and now that one isn't generally food consumption, food product safe, so that one's more for crafts and things like that. It's epoxy resin. And then the other side I did the Parks brand epoxy, and that one does say that it is for like countertops and bar tops and things like that, so it's presumed to be safe for the kitchen and for prepping food. So I did do half and half on both just because that's what I had on hand. Now, the next big question I get is, how much does this cost? Now, there's two ways to break this down. You can get the Giani kit, which runs about 80 bucks, and that usually comes with your primer, some of your main colors, and a thin clear coat, along with a sponge, a roller, and a little video. Now, that's a great, convenient package, especially for a first timer. However, it's $80 for that kit, and generally it covers probably between 5 to 10 square foot, depending on how many layers of paint you actually do and how absorbent the surface is that is underneath. So depending on if you're using concrete, wood, formica, tile, whatever you're painting over, how absorbent it is, the more absorbent and porous it is, the more paint you're going to need to cover it. The less porous, or like the more sealed, such as formica or something like tile, it won't take as much paint. So if that makes sense. Anyways, if you do the Giani kit, it's great, but I recommend, highly recommend, that you save your work, you preserve it by sealing it with epoxy too. Now that's going to be an additional cost. That's not something that comes with the Giani kit. So I do recommend it because you're going to go through all of that work and it's going to look great, but at the end of the day, it's not waterproof. You can't use any type of chemicals, you can't food prep on it. They generally tell you not to use it. So what's the function? It looks great, but it's a kitchen counter generally is what the product is, and you can't really use it. So lately I've been veering more towards forgoing the Giani kit and doing it in a cheaper version, because the epoxy is what's really so important to me and what seals it and what gives it that awe factor. So I've been doing it with acrylics. Now I use a really good primer, and this primer is really important because I don't prepare by sanding or doing anything else to the furniture or the pieces that I'm working on, such as the countertops, etc. I just use the primer, and then I can start doing my paints right away. But the primer is key. So I'll show you guys the primer that I do use. And you'll notice that I'm doing it right over the countertops, and I'll do it over creases, and it's like splintered top wood, and I'm still just painting right over it because I intend on doing so many layers of that dimension and stuff, plus the epoxy, you won't even be able to tell how damaged the top was before I started. So I recommend using acrylics because they're so much cheaper. And another question I get asked about the acrylics is, how much does that cost? Well, that depends. See, I happen to have a lot of acrylics on hand, so this entire table didn't cost me anything to make over. I had all of these products on hand. But if you were going from scratch and you had to go and you buy it, you'd probably have to pick up a primer, or like, for instance, I probably maybe used half of this for this entire table, not even, maybe a quarter of this jar, plus I used about 1, maybe 2 full bottles of the pearl mica of this size, and then you can add other colors. For instance, you could add silver, you could add gold, you could add gold flakes, you can add glitter. Also, don't forget to trim your sponge to get off any strays, because you do not want those to get loose in your paint or onto the surface of what you're painting. So go ahead and remove those, trim them off before you do it. You also want your sponge to be a little bit damp. The damp sponge will allow you to use less paint. If it's dry, it's going to take all of that paint and absorb it up until it's nice and damp, and then you're going to start getting the actual effect you're looking for. So don't waste your time, just pre-damp your sponge, not to where it's dripping wet, but just damp. Another question I get asked a lot is, do the colors matter? Like, how do I get the sleek black look? Like with the kitchen counters, all I did was use the black primer, and then I covered it with epoxy. The only thing with that is it's so highly reflective that if you make a mistake, it's so noticeable. Like if I had a dimple or shrinkage from not using enough epoxy, it was very noticeable in the black because it's so smooth that everything that it stands out to it. When you do these multiple colors like this, especially in these white hues, it basically disguises any mistakes. Like you could screw up majorly in like the paint or the epoxy or the textures, or you could leave lumps or clumps and you won't really see it. It disguises it. Even if it gets scratched after the fact, it disguises it. I don't know, it's just great. What types of different surfaces can you do? And you can do this on wood grain, formica, concrete, etc. But again, like I said, the more porous the surface is, the more paint that it's going to require and the more layers. So that leads to the next question. How many layers do I do? Well, that just depends too. That depends on, can I get it all done in like 3 or 4 layers and get the look that I want? Or does it look a little spotty or uneven? Or did I mess up and then I need to add more layers? Do I want more depth to it? The more layers you go, the more depth and dimension you're going to get when you put that epoxy over the top. It's going to look like stone. Like when you look into it, it has depth, it has dimension, it has layers to it. And you can really see that the more layers you do. So that's up to you. It doesn't matter. You can do anywhere between 4 to 15 layers, like in my case when I mess up at times. What colors and things do you use? Now the Giani kits, they come in different color schemes and you can kind of mix and match if you've got them a la carte, but they do come in the basic colors that they sell. You can also get many other colors if you go about it the acrylic route. Now I particularly like whites and blacks and any shade of gray, 50 shades of gray. So everything in our house is generally in a shade of gray, black, or white. So that is what you'll see here. If you don't like that, it's not your preference, you can add that or make it whatever colors you want. Like if you want it to be brown tones, blue tones, purple tones, gray tones, green tones, it doesn't matter. The possibilities are endless if you go the acrylics route. You can go into any home improvement store, craft store, and find acrylics, or you can go online. So that route can cost you anywhere from 50 cents a bottle if they're on sale to a couple bucks depending on the size, and those will last you actually quite a while. So it depends on how you want to go about this. You can also just use gold like acrylic, which I did on this table here. I wanted some gold like looking flakes type look, and I kind of had like a little mess up, which I'll answer that too. What do you do if you mess up? You just paint over it. So I painted over some of the like gold stuff, but what it left behind was like these peekaboos, which made it look like natural gold specks or flakes that were in the granite. So it worked out. So when you make mistakes, don't think you're doomed and you've screwed up. Just paint over it. That's what's so great about this. And that's why I like to do the paint and then the epoxy over it. Where did I get the glitter? The glitter did not come with the Giani kit. Now I've heard that some of the kits, or that you can buy them separately or something, that they come with now like a mineral type of a glitter-esque type thing, but I haven't been purchasing the Giani kits, so I cannot confirm that. I don't know. At the time that I was buying them, they didn't come with the glitter. I picked it up at the Dollar Tree. I literally have glitter all over the house that comes in leftover kits from Halloween or from my kids' craft kits, or that we just pick up in the Dollar Tree in general. The cost of epoxy is another big question that I get. How much does epoxy cost? Now, a quart of epoxy, which covers about 1/2 of this table, cost about $20 to 25 bucks. I did find a quart, or smaller than a quart size actually, at Hobby Lobby. It was $20.99, and then I used my 40% off sale, or 40% off coupon, and I got it for just over $12. So 1/2 will cost about $12, whereas the other half cost just a little over, or a little under the quart, because I didn't use a full quart. So a quart can cost you anywhere between $12 to $25, depending on the sale, the price, where you're getting it from, and what kind of epoxy. The gallon kits of epoxy cost anywhere between $50 to $70. Make sure that you prepare by taping everything, putting plastic wrap, or I like to use press and seal because I find that it's very convenient, seals things up, easy to wrap and easy to clean up. Make sure that you're putting plastic underneath everything. You're using anything that's disposable. If you're wearing rings or anything that you don't want damaged, take it off. But make sure you're also wearing gloves, because this stuff will get everywhere. Like, this stuff is so sticky and so tacky. It will ruin things if it gets on the object and dries there. It won't come off properly. It'll like peel that sucker off. But another common question that we get is, what did we do the backsplash portion of the countertops with if we didn't use the epoxy? Now, the Giani kit comes with a thin clear coat, and I like to use this particular polyacrylic brand, or either the thin clear coat that comes in the Giani kit, because I find that they're very similar. And I use this for the backsplash portion instead of the epoxy, because the epoxy is heavier and it gives more of a drippy effect, where the polyacrylic is thinner and it's a little bit smoother on the back as far as gravity goes. One particular tip that I do have for you guys is, if you're going to be pouring the epoxy and you're concerned about how long it's going to take to dry or to cure, you can always do it right before you're going to go on a vacation, or if you're going to be out of the house for a few hours, as long as you don't have pets or anything like that to be concerned about. Otherwise, you just want to make sure that you don't have any type of fans or anything above blowing any type of dust or any type of gunk into your epoxy, because if that dries in there, it's going to be stuck in there for good. Other than that, you just kind of pour your epoxy, you smooth it, and then it's time to start blowing out the bubbles. Now, I'm going to be showing you guys different techniques of how to blow out the bubbles in this one, like I mentioned before. Going to give you guys demonstrations that go along with that too, such as using a blow dryer, using a straw, and using a torch. So you'll see that as that comes up as well. And lastly is just about prep. Just make sure to prep, have all of your supplies and everything ready to go before you get started, because this is one of those things you can't like stop and start and stop and start. You have to get it all done in one swift move. Will a blow dryer work? Yes, a blow dryer will work. Do I prefer it? No. I prefer the torch because it's faster. It kind of just gets it done in one big, quick, swift move. The heat to it it's faster. However, if you don't feel like going that route, you don't have one, or you just have a blow dryer on hand, you can use a blow dryer. The reason I don't prefer it is because I'm clumsy, and I generally will get hair or dust or something will fly into it using the blow dryer. I also, with using the blow dryer, find that I have to use a straw to get stubborn ones, because the blow dryer, it doesn't have the same temperature or degree of heat that the torch gets that will pop the bubbles from a distance. So you'll find yourself with the blow dryer needing to get closer to pop the bubbles, but then that kind of warps your epoxy and kind of creates more bubbles, or rippling effect. And so if you get too close with it, it's not as effective. If you're at the perfect distance away, it works fine. So yes, you can use a blow dryer. We've had so many people ask, and I've had several people that have told me it does work, but I myself wanted to try it before I told you guys. So yes, it does work. Now, what can you do on these countertops with the epoxy versus without the epoxy? If you don't use the epoxy, there's really not much function to the countertops unless you're super gentle. Now, I have kids and I'm clumsy. It's not going to work for me to be gentle with anything. And I need durability. I need it to sustain our lifestyle. Our lifestyle is cooking a lot, making snacks, creating drinks, cats jumping up here or there. It's chaos. So I needed countertops that were going to stand up to them. And this is what the epoxy does for us. It allows me to clean with chemicals, water, to use wipes, this and that and whatever, and it works fine. How long does it take to dry? Now, I generally wait at least 1 day before I actually touch the surface of it to see, and then generally it's actually decent enough that it's okay to, if you were say using counters in your bathroom, you could brush your teeth and the sink would be fine. I wouldn't recommend using it anytime within the first 24 hours because if you were to accidentally get a splash of water or something on it, it will leave those little drips. It'll actually indent into the epoxy and that will evaporate and you'll have little driplet looking dimples, so to speak. And you don't want that, especially because that's going to harden and that'll harden into your epoxy. So to prevent that, don't use it for 24 hours. After 24 hours, it's safe to use lightly. I try to wait at least 1 to 2 full weeks for it to be solidly hard to put heavier items on top of. Now, anywhere between the first day or 2 of use, anywhere up to 2 months of use, if you put something that's got a heavier weight on it, it might dent into your epoxy, kind of like carpet does if you have furniture that's heavy on it. But if you remove the item, you'll notice that it will also lift up like carpet. Now that I've noticed generally within the first 2 months. After 2 months, I haven't noticed any type of give. It seems like the thicker the epoxy is, the longer it takes to fully cure and to get hard like glass. So to everyone, it's going to be different depending on how thick your epoxy is, okay? What do you do if it scratches? Here's the thing. With these lighter colors, you don't really notice scratches as much. The way to prevent scratching is to not use any type of material or slide anything across it that is grainy or has, I don't know, like a rough, coarse texture. What I like to do is, like, you can take felt pads or felt little tips, and you can get those at the Dollar Tree too, and you can put those underneath the surfaces of certain things that you will or do intend on sliding. If you do make a mistake or something happens, you can try to fill the little mistakes or the gaps or the cuts or whatever with some type of a clear coat nail polish, or you can do it with some more epoxy. Now, if you do get dimples, like say you don't use enough epoxy, you'll notice dimpling. Now, the way to prevent that is to use plenty of epoxy. You want to have a very thick coat. Think about like if you were doing your nails and you were putting your top coat on and you want to cover the whole top, but if you didn't have enough polish, how it would drag, or you'd have some left off the end, you couldn't come back and just do one streak on just that spot because then it would be uneven everywhere else. You have to go over the whole coat, the whole base in order to give it a smooth finished look. Same thing would apply here with the epoxy. Once it's started to set or to cure, it's going to be kind of hard to mold or to move, and so trying to come and put something else beside it, you're going to notice those layers. If you do it while it's still wet, however, it's fine, it'll all kind of blend together. You can do multiple layers of different colored epoxies on top of each other, mixing those together all while they're wet, and that's fine. Once it's dry though, you'll want to do a complete layer with another complete layer. Now, I've showed you guys in one of my other videos that I used the Tan-Wise Tan Remover, I know it sounds strange, to remove any stains, but I did have somebody who removed a stain using bleach, and she did notice some yellowing afterwards, and so we weren't sure how to go about removing the yellowing. Somebody else had a problem with some yellowing because they left a crock pot on top of their countertop, and what they did is they used like toner developer like you would with hair bleach. So I would think, since using that toner developer worked to remove the yellowing from the heat yellowing from the crock pot, that it would also work from removing the yellowing from the bleach. Now, I haven't tested this out, but connecting the dots between what it's actually intended for, what it was used for, it kind of makes sense that it would work for what it's intended for, right? If you guys try it out, let me know how it works. I'm just trying to share some of your experiences with everyone else because it's you guys that are testing these out. I can only do so much for me, and it works for me. And then if you guys have different circumstances, it's up to you guys to let me know what's going on so that we can work on your individual circumstance and try to figure out what's going on, how to fix it or resolve it, or I don't know, go about educating everyone else before they attempt it if it doesn't work. So even if there are some fails out there, you have to let me know so that I can tell people, look, this doesn't work, please don't do this, like save them. How do you get epoxy in small spaces? You could use a spoon for this, you could use the straw, you could use like just your hand. Be creative, inventive, improvise, doesn't matter. I mean, I've used different objects for stirring, like wood sticks and spoons and Tupperware, etc. So I mean, you saw what I was mixing my epoxy in a hand sanitizer wipes container that I knew I was going to throw out, but I saved it so that I could put my epoxy in this toss-up. It's up to you guys. Another question. Can you do inside the sink? Yes, you can. Here's a little tidbit for that though. If you're going to go inside the sink, make sure that you are removing the piping from underneath and stuffing something up in there so that way you're not getting epoxy into your drains. If your epoxy gets in your drains and that dries up, it's sealed. You won't be able to get water through those pipes. So you need to undo the pipes, turn your water off obviously, undo your pipes, and then just stick something like a bag or something up in there to catch everything as you're going, and that'll actually be a good way to preserve or save some epoxy so that you can use it elsewhere if you need to. But then once you're done and it's starting to set, you can release that and allow the epoxy to drain through into like a cup or something, and then once it's completely dried, you can reattach your sink hardware and turn your water back on to allow the flow. But I do recommend that you remove the hardware underneath if you're going to do an inside sink. If you're not going to be painting inside the sink, I've had people ask, should you remove your sink? Well, that depends on you and what your future goals are. Do you plan on replacing your sink in the future? If so, then I would recommend going ahead and lifting it, doing all your painting and your epoxy, and then replacing it and putting it back in, so that way it's just as easy to remove later on. If you plan on leaving the sink and it's a done deal and you want that to be nice and waterproof and sealed in, then you can go ahead and just tape around your sink, put your epoxy, and then just remove your tape about 20 or 30 minutes after pouring your epoxy, and it will self-settle into the edge and create a nice beautiful seal. For aesthetic looks, it's up to you if you decide to add caulk or not. It's really personal preference. It's not required if you do the epoxy seal up, because the epoxy is going to create a waterproof seal for you. Anyways guys, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and this was just part 2 of my project room makeover. I will be doing another video where I'm kind of finishing things up. I'm doing the window bench seat and a couple of other things to finish up a little here and there. I also did chairs that go to this table, so if you want to see those and how I did those and recovered them, you can check that out on my last video, part 1 of the project room makeover, where I made those chairs over. And so yes, this ugly duckling has made quite the makeover, if I do say so myself. I love it, it's gorgeous, it's probably one of my favorite pieces that I've done so far. So I'm actually kind of glad that it is my desk and that I get to be selfish and look at it and use it all the time and keep everybody away. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. I'll catch you on the next video, guys. Bye.